Part 21. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 201. Chapter 201. Let's make a bet. Tang Wan's body was immediately pressed down by Frank's hand. Sit back on the seat. It was also at this time that Tang Wan realized that Frank's hand seemed a little too strong. She heard Frank's voice in her ears. She didn't know if Tang Wan's mentality had changed. She always felt that Frank's voice was a little too gloomy. Revealed his feelings when he saw Frank for the first time. The cold feeling of being stared at by some kind of monster. Are you scared? Tang Wan asked yourself. She is actually not very scared. From the time she could remember, from the moment she lost her mother, she had been thinking and analyzing all the time. Reason and calmness are the only ways for her to get out of the devil's cave. Now, Tang Wan thinks so too. It is not advisable to mess up your position. But the little girl above is indeed in pain. Moreover, Tang Wan felt that she looked familiar. But children grow too fast. They haven't seen each other in the past few months, and the little girl above has her face covered again, making Tang Wan a little unsure. But regardless of whether it was the person she knew or not, according to Tang Wan's character, she would not let the little girl encounter such a dangerous thing. Tang Wan thought of this and looked up to see the stage start. Tang Wan couldn't tell what kind of music it was, but it seemed a little weird in this flower house. It sounds like some kind of dark, moist creature, or some kind of gloomy gaze, with a sticky, unkind feeling. It creeps up one's spine inch by inch, making one feel cold. The sun is shining outside, but it feels like you are sitting in the middle of winter. Xiao Heking on the side also felt something unusual around him. He grabbed Tang Wan's hand and pulled her towards him. Then he whispered this in her ear, "Be careful. If anything goes wrong, run towards me. Don't let go of my hand." Tang Wan heard Xiao Heking's words and nodded obediently. But her eyes did not leave the puppet on the stage. As the music changes, the puppet on the stage dances with the silk thread above like a kite with its string broken. Tang Wan saw with keen eyes that the puppet's wrists had been stretched with red marks by silk threads and were about to be embedded in her flesh. The red traces are so firmly embedded in the fragile skin that they almost blend into the blood. Her fingertips were turning an abnormal blue color, which looked very bad. If the girl is not rescued soon, her hand will become useless. However, the children below were still watching the performance on the stage with great interest. They were eating exquisite pastries in their hands, and they were still commenting on the gorgeous decadence in their mouths. Those Spanish words are like the whispers of evil spirits, saying curses that want to eat people. No one cares whether the child above is dead or alive. They only care whether the scene is interesting enough. Fer looked at Tang Wan's side face, but he was thinking in his heart, would this oriental doll put everything aside to save the girl above? Being a spoiler in public, making everyone dislike her, she went to save the person who hated her the most in the world. While Fer was thinking, a cold object touched his lower back. What is being pushed against is a piece of bone. Once it is broken, you will probably be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. Flower's expression did not change, and he turned his head to look at Tang Wan beside him in surprise, as if he couldn't figure out why Tang Wan was so bold. However, Tang Wan had no intention of explaining it to him. She quietly approached Frank, raised the tablet, and read on it. "I don't like this surprise, so I will also give you a surprise that you won't like. Put her down." The object behind Fer punched into his body. Jean Fer almost fell to the ground. He gritted his teeth, looked at Tang Wan with his blue eyes aggrievedly, and said, "Don't you like puppet shows?" Tang Wan knew that this evil-minded kid was stalling for time. Because, the little girl's body had risen higher and higher. She was hung at a height of 10 meters, dangling, and looked like she was about to fall. Full suddenly said, "Let's make a bet. Just bet that in 1 minute, she will fall to her death or stay in mid-air. If she stays in the air for 1 minute, I'll let her go. Tang Wan felt that Frank might not be so kind, but here, it seemed that she had only this option. After all, Tang Wan will not ignore death. She nodded. However, the next second, a buzzing sound came from the sky, and Tang Wan subconsciously raised his head. The people around her also exclaimed. It's a drone. Are these drones going to cut silk threads? If they fall from such a height, they will fall to death, right? Xiao Heking spoke much faster than usual at this time, no longer so cold, and even a little anxious. This is too dangerous, put her down quickly. But this is not China, and these children's understanding of life is not that important. Even blinked a little blankly, looking particularly innocent. There is an innocent cruelty. Why? She is, Frank's thing. Frank can do whatever he wants. She is dishonest. Tang Wan couldn't understand these Spanish words, but Xiao Heking heard them clearly. He answered them in the same language, you are killing people. But the kids just shrugged innocently and didn't take it to heart at all. Tang stared at Frank in front of him with a wide smile, those black eyes seemed to be saying. You are cheating. But Fer just smiled, as if watching a delightful show. An earth-shattering and unique performance. Sudden. The fan blades of the drone cut open the silk thread on the puppet's left hand and also cut open her skin. Tang Wan heard a sharp scream coming from mid-air, but it was too far away and didn't sound obvious. Now, the puppet in mid-air only has a silk thread hanging on one hand, swinging in the sky. Her feet were kicking helplessly, the entire weight of her body hanging on one hand, surrounded by the drones next to her exposed skin. The buzzing sound is like a curse, causing the puppet to cry and curse. Ah, let me down. Woo-oh, I want to go home, I want to go home. Let me go home, woohoo. Mom, I want mom. Finally, the drone flew to the right side of the puppet and cut the thread. The little girl fell directly from a height of 10 meters. People present were excited, scared, and panicked. There was only one unwavering figure, rushing out without hesitation. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 202. Chapter 202 Pious Prayer for Forgiveness of Sins. Tang Wan lay on the ground, held his head with both hands, relaxed his breathing, and softened his body. Then close your eyes and wait for the pain to come. However, this time, the expected pain did not come. Tang Wan opened his eyes with some confusion, turned his head, and saw a large net opened above him at some point, catching the puppet. Tang Wan's heartbeat was still very fast. She pursed her lips and crawled out from under the net. I saw the face of the puppet. There is a feeling that the dust has settled, and there is also a certain certainty that it is indeed the case. That is Sujiajia's face. It's just that her smooth and flawless face is now covered with scars, covering her tender skin like spider webs, and the festering wounds are like cracks, swallowing up what little is left intact. Looking very embarrassed, Tang Wan walked to the big net and stretched out his hand to see Sujiajia's wrist that had just been strangled by the silk thread. However, the pale Sujiajia seemed to have been frightened. She covered her face and rolled down the big net, and returned to the corner, trembling. As if he were running away from some ferocious beast. In short, he looked very panicked. Tang Wan raised his eyebrows. He didn't miss Sujiajia's movements, but he was just a little confused. In the final analysis, what Sujiajia did during her wasted years was just bullying. Compared to her mother and those evil people, Sujiajia's malice was not even painful to Tang Wan. And, most importantly, how could Sujiajia be afraid of herself? Tang Wan turned his back to Friel, a classmate behind him, and walked towards Sujiajia step by step, wanting to know the answer to his question. Sujiajia just huddled in the corner and kept saying, "This is not right, This is not right. No, it shouldn't be like this. Tangwan, Tangwan, Tangwan should be dead. This world is fake, fake. I want to go back, I want to go back, let me go back. Her voice was sometimes shrill and sometimes desperate, and she looked like she was scared out of her mind. There was even some aggression. But Tangwan did not step back even half an inch. Instead, he tilted his head, like a kitten looking at something curious, and squatted down slowly. Then he looked at Sujiajia, who was looking crazy. No one knows what Tangwan is thinking. I just think she looks a little childish like this. Sujiajia was still shouting, "Get out of here, get out of here. This is not my life." Tangwan's pupils narrowed slightly, and he had a bold and absurd guess in his mind. This is not my life. This world is fake. Combining these two sentences, is it possible that Sujiajia has experienced something? But in her former world, she would not have a happy ending. But Tangwan was not sure about Sujiajia's mental state when she said this. When people avoid the facts, they will have such illusions. You will feel that there is a gap between yourself and the world, and that the world you are in is not the real world. Tangwan never despises or looks down on anyone, and she never lets go of any clues. However, Sujiajia's condition was really bad. She almost pressed against the wall when she saw Tangwan getting closer and closer to her. He was still shouting, "I didn't cause your death. You jumped down yourself. Don't come to me, get out of here. Ah, get out of here. Mom, 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 I'm so scared. Save me, take me back, I don't want to be here." Tangwan suddenly felt a dizzy feeling in his head, and several scenes seemed to flash before his eyes. It is a deep night and bustling high-rise buildings. Opposite are the neon mirage and the city where the sun never sets. As well as suffocating loneliness. Those dull pains were like a pair of big hands covering Tangwan's mouth and nose, making her unable to make a sound or breathe. She seemed to see the crowd of people walking like ants under the building. Their expressions are hidden in the boundless night. Then she jumped. She seemed to hear herself saying something in an unfamiliar voice. Tangwan struggled, desperately trying to hear clearly, but in the end he could only see his relieved eyes. She was like a kite with its string cut off, and she looked forward to death without hesitation. Tangwan's knees weakened and he fell on the stage opposite Sujiajia. With the black curtain behind him, it looks like the curtain call of an absurd circus. If. Tangwan thought to himself. Just if. Just a guess without factual basis. If what she just saw was herself in parallel time and space, then is Sujiajia also connected to herself in a certain time and space? Compared to things like rebirth that have no scientific basis, Tangwan is more willing to use the theory of parallel time and space to improve this guess. The self in the memory fragments looks so lonely. Like a weed that died in spring, no one cares about it. Is it me in that world, where Brother Lulin didn't take me away, where I didn't meet Grandma Lu and Grandma Si, and I didn't get to know my father? Does she have no friends or relatives? She doesn't know that her mother is a very good person. Did she not see the letter home from her mother? Has she not found the Shui family and has been wandering in a malicious world without a home? Do you think that you have been abandoned by everyone, and that you are a soul that no one likes in an environment full of malicious eyes? Just so alone, using my last bargaining chip to fall into the darkness. She has nothing. It just grew up staggeringly. A sweaty hand covered Tangwan's eyes, and Xiao Heking's slightly cold voice could be heard in his ears. He hugged Tangwan and whispered, "Don't be afraid. I'll take you home. Don't look, dirty eyes." Flower came to Tangwan's side at some point. His Chinese language setting that he couldn't speak well came online again. He blinked his blue eyes and looked a little innocent. "Candy, please don't, forget our bet. You lose." Fur clapped his hands, and a group of men in black emerged from behind the stage and dragged Sujiajia off. Obviously, this sloppy puppet show dissatisfied the freer students present. They had a unique local arrogant expression on their faces, and looked at Tangwan and Xiao Heking with a bit of disdain. Only people from the East have such a complex. Only they can be so weak. Saving people should be profitable. As for this kind of thing of saving people as a meat mat configured, that's what God does. They just need to give God a lot of money and then devoutly pray for forgiveness of sins. You can go to heaven. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 203. Chapter 203 Freer College. Tangwan seemed to hear the thoughts of the children around her. She pursed her lips, stretched out her hand, and grabbed Xiao Heking's shoulders. The small fingertips pinched the fabric in his hand, crumpling it into undulating marks. Those messy wrinkles are like Tangwan's current thoughts. Don't show fear at this time. She represents the face of Lingyun School, and there is Xiao Heking beside her who should not be involved. Tangwan knew that Frank was coming for her, so she should face it by herself. Just like Mom said. Protect the public to the greatest extent possible within our capabilities. Tang, you can understand Mom, right? It was like many voices were exploding in my head, and every nerve was being pulled hard by an invisible hand. Tangwan thought of this, slowly raised his head, and then looked at Frank, who was standing next to him with a fake smile on his face. Protecting flowers and protecting them is a mother's duty. Wearing high-end clothes and doing things that are inferior to beasts. She must be tired after hugging her for so long. In the name of an aristocratic school, they engage in uncivilized beastly behavior. But I am still on their territory, so naturally I cannot resolve these matters according to domestic behavior. There was not much color in her face, and her mind was still a little confused. Stand. My mind is not as clear as before. Such an action did make her relax a bit. Admit that you lost the bet this time. So Tangwan saw that the smile on Frank's face was a little more genuine. Tangwan shook his head slightly, hoping this would relieve a little pain. She still had a lot of words that she had not written yet and wanted to talk to Frank properly. The curve of that smile really looks a little childish and a little more innocent. She felt a little pain all over her body, and the contents in her mind were about to become reality, as if they were clamoring to come out. Some people will miss the precious flowers in other people's gardens, but they obviously don't care for them, but they want to keep them as their own. Tangwan knew that this school was not the schools in his country. They were very barbaric. So Tangwan nodded. Tangwan didn't want to be involved with Frank for too long because of this bet. She thought for a while and patted Xiao Heking's arm, hugging her, asking him to put her down. However, Xiao Heking did not realize what Tangwan meant. Instead, he looked at Tangwan strangely, as if he didn't understand why she did such a move. Tangwan. Tangwan misses Lulin a little. Lulin would not be so stupid. But Tangwan didn't show it, he just took out the tablet and wrote on it. Senior, please let me down. But Xiao Heking shook his head and whispered, run fast. Tangwan immediately understood what Xiao Heking meant. Xiao Heking was afraid of an accident, so he hugged himself and ran fast. But Tangwan glanced around subconsciously, feeling helpless. With so many people, where can they run to? Besides, now that they haven't completely broken up, it won't be so ugly. This is not the high seas, nor is it unregulated land. What is the problem here? It is an international issue. On the surface, they will not tear off this layer of human skin. Tangwan did not say these words. She knew that Xiao Hecking was only concerned and confused. Means good intentions. So Tang Wan just nodded appeasingly, and then wrote and drew on the tablet. That font is much cuter. Thank you, Ovo. Then he wrote on it again. However, there was no stake in the bet we just made. It's just that the font this time looks regular at first glance, without even a facial expression. The smile on Fur's face suddenly froze. Then he realized that from beginning to end, he had been talking about the bet between him and Tang Wan. Tang Wan just nodded. Nothing was promised. Thinking of this, the expression on Fur's face suddenly turned gloomy. Looking very gloomy. And Tang Wan continued to write. But since I nodded, I might as well give something. Fur watched Tang Wan take out a candy from his pocket and put it in front of him. Then I'll give you a candy. Putting the candy on Fur's hand, Tang Wan withdrew his hand and even looked away stingily. Fur pursed his lips, took the candy, and watched Tang Wan and Xiao Hecking leave his sight. Then his fingers slowly tightened, and the hard candy became a little sticky due to the warmth of his palm. He looked at Tang Wan's leaving figure, and his mood became more and more gloomy. At this moment, the bodyguard who had just dragged Sujiajia down came to Fuer's side, leaned close to his ear, and whispered something. Master, she's awake, but... Full glanced at the bodyguard, with deep disgust in his eyes, and said coldly, Speak. But she seems crazy. Hearing this, Fu raised his eyebrows and said, Are you crazy? He sneered and wanted to throw the fruit candy in his hand, but he didn't know what he thought of. He held it in his hand and said again, Are you starting to act crazy? Do you think this can withstand our loss of 10 million US dollars? Tisk, does she know how long we have been looking for that root because of what she said? Andrew is still angry. The godfather and the successors of the Andrew family are still fighting for the root. How can she compensate for delaying so many things for us? The bodyguard did not continue to talk about this topic. He knew that what Fu wanted was not his answer. After a while, the bodyguard saw that his young master was still holding the cheap candy in his hand, and took the initiative to walk to Fu, stretched out his hand, and said respectfully, Young master, let me throw it away for you. After all, such candy should not appear in front of the Brown family at all. However, Fu glanced at the bodyguard, put the candy into his pocket, and said, Nothing. Then he raised his feet and walked in the direction of Sujiajia. On the other side, Tang Wan had just left the greenhouse when a large number of messages came from his watch. It was only then that Tang Wan realized that there was no signal in the greenhouse. It was just that there were many people at the time, so Tang Wan did not notice this. Now that I have discovered it, I feel that Frank, a kid, has more intentions than briquettes. But fortunately, Tang Wan was wary of Frank from the beginning. So be prepared. Tang Wan looked at the latest news. It was Chris, whom he had not seen for a long time. He saw that his address had changed to a foreign country, so he took the initiative to come over and ask himself where he was. Tang Tang. Where are you? Tang Wan answered directly. Tang Tang, I am an exchange student in Freer. Chris didn't seem to expect that Tang Wan would reply to him so quickly. A few seconds later, Chris replied to Tang Wan, and the surprise above almost spilled out through the chat window. I also go to school in Freer. Wait for me to come to school and take you to play. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 204. Chapter 204 Circus Clown. By the time Chris arrived at school, Tang Wan and Xiao Hecking were already having lunch in the cafeteria of Freer College. Just what is served is not suitable for Eastern stomachs. Tang Wan looked at the sandwich in front of him and ate it without changing his expression. But Xiao Hecking could not accept it so easily. He rubbed his brows and said to the teacher beside him, Isn't there any pasta? The teacher thought for a moment, then shook his head. Tang Wan didn't believe that they didn't have pasta. Someone probably said something that made them prepare nothing for themselves. When Tang Wan thought of this, a figure suddenly appeared in his mind. Probably still Frank. It made the students around me sneeze uncontrollably. It's just that Tang Wan didn't expect that this school would listen to Frank so much and actually not give face to the friend's school. It's because the food they prepared is not delicious, and it's because they have no way of hospitality. What a strange taste. Tang Wan turned the watch on his wrist. Use magic to defeat magic. The atmosphere in the cafeteria was a little restless. Everyone looked at Tang Wan and the young master of Andrew's family. Tang Wan could feel the eyes of the surrounding people looking at him and Xiao Heking. They wanted to make a fool of themselves, but Tang Wan was not as good as they wanted. Tang Wan still couldn't understand their words, but through their expressions, Tang Wan could probably understand what they meant. Tang Wan thought for a while, then took out a bottle of Laoganma from his backpack and handed it to Xiao Heking. Besides him, Tang Wan could not think of anyone else. The bodyguard behind him was also holding a large pot, and the smell inside was even stronger. The message above was what she had just sent to Chris, asking him to prepare 3 small hot pots for her. It's just that this thing Tang Wan brought seemed a little out of place for them. Suddenly, this domineering smell occupied the small world here in Tangwan, making the students around Tangwan slightly stunned. I feel a little strange in my heart. As we all know, Laoganma has a great taste. What does this smell like? It's so pungent. Even in their eyes, this bottle of sauce is very cheap, but taking it out now is a slap in their face. Thank God, Tang Wan never forgot the habit of going outside and bringing condiments for herself, so even if they gave them such unpalatable food, Tang Wan still finished them. Akyu. Next, a figure that had not been seen for a long time ran in from the direction of the door. The relationship between the young master of the Andrew family and this exchange student seems to be very good. Is it possible that they are real friends? The power of the Andrew family in this school is as strong as that of the Brown family. They are all studying here, but they all dislike each other and dislike each other. But today, they saw the unusual full Brown and the unusual Chris Andrew. You must know that they have never seen these 2 young masters running forward and backward before. Thinking of this, the students present felt a little uneasy after hearing Fur's words. Fall is not afraid of Chris, but that doesn't mean they are not afraid. However, Chris did not give them any extra expressions and looked at the hot pot in front of him wholeheartedly. He doesn't like spicy food very much, so he prepares clear soup for himself. But in front of Tang Wan's eyes, there was a fiery red soup. Combined with the overbearing taste, it was simply mouth-watering. As for Xiao Heking, he was about to lose his reaction. First it was Fur, and then Chris. Xiao Heking had a deeper understanding of his schoolgirl. It's really amazing. How can someone know so many people without leaving home? Speaking of which, do the young masters and ladies in China know about it? Xiao Heking found it interesting when she thought of Fu Wenzi's behavior of following Tang Wan like a puppy. Even though I am a young schoolgirl, my dog training skills are second to none. However, she shouldn't say that her friend is a puppy. Tang Wan also cares about them. Only sincerity can change sincerity. Thinking of this, Xiao Heking turned his attention to Tang Wan and Chris. I want to see how these 2 children get along. Who knows? Chris spoke unskilled Mandarin, picked up the serving chopsticks, and cooked a lot of meat for Tang Wan. Then he gave them all to Tang Wan, leaving none for himself. Tang Tang, Kui see, this is what Wo found during this time, and it fell a lot. They are snail slices, each piece is about the size of a palm. They are still steaming after being boiled in a clear soup. They are swaying on Chris's chopsticks, and you can tell they are delicious at a glance. Tang Wan nodded, took over Chris's feeding, and then handed Chris the hot pot condiments he had mixed. The bodyguard on the side saw that there were scallions in the bowl of condiments, and immediately stretched out his hand to stop it, but Chris took it without hesitation. He also said, "Thank you Tang Tang, it suits my taste very well." The corners of Xiao Heking's mouth twitched, and he almost couldn't maintain his cold face. "You don't even take a bite, do you know it tastes good?" This flattery is too obvious. But then, Chris really started eating, leaving the bodyguards on the side dumbfounded. If the timing wasn't right, the bodyguard would have taken out his cell phone, took a photo of Chris's current appearance, and sent it to his employer. Not picky at all. The food is delicious. You can't see the usual overlord look at all. For a while, the atmosphere among the three of them was very good and they ate very happily. It just made Fur, who had been observing Tang Wan, unhappy. He looked at Chris, who was shaking his head in front of Tang Wan, and took a hard bite of the steak in his hand. Then he said to the bodyguards on the side, "Who asked you to give Tang Tang such low-quality things? Whoever makes his own decisions will be punished." "It's the young master." Fu's temper was so unstable. It was clear that he had just said that he wanted Tang Wan to eat unpalatable food and asked her to come to him for food. Unexpectedly, Chris would interrupt this plan. Fu licked the tiger's teeth, feeling extremely irritable. Then turn off the monitoring. Suddenly, a string of English words appeared on the screen in front of him, as well as a grimace on it, which seemed to be mocking. Fleur's movement to leave suddenly stopped. He crossed his arms across his chest, faced the screen, and said something in Spanish. Meaning is Fu Wenzi. The ghostly face on the screen transformed into a circus clown and let out a weird laugh. Then he left a few words. "Bedbug in the dark, you are making bad plans again. Have you not had enough of the previous lessons?" Fur's expression changed, and he shouted to the bodyguards behind him, "Get out of here. This matter cannot be known to anyone. Let alone reach the ears of the Godfather. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him." Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 205. Chapter 205 The only color in the world. After all, that incident was the most embarrassing thing for Fur as he grew up. It's just that the clown on the screen is still there, but the words above have quietly changed and become a sentence. "You'd better not act rashly, otherwise if I can do something like that once, I can do it a second time." It has actually been just over a year since the last confrontation between Fu Wenzi and Fur. Fu Wenzi always kept a low profile and never mentioned the previous confrontation with Fur anywhere. It is also a transnational information war. Different from Fur, who likes to solve problems with real hands, Fu Wenzi is more like a well-hidden hunter who secretly kills people or things he doesn't like with one blow. So, when he saw Fu Wenzi at the last cruise banquet, Fur was still a little unbelievable. It was Fu Wenzi who he had had a confrontation with before. Different from others who call him a devil, Fu Wenzi is a cold-blooded monster. Fur was not a timid man. The other side, domestic. At that moment, Fur felt as if he was locked by some indifferent machine. Fur vaguely remembered what Fu Wenzi said. Fu Wenzi held a modified pistol in his hand and pointed it at his temple, but did not fire. Fur pursed his lips, looking at the warning in front of him. He couldn't help but laugh. He can be smiling to anyone, and he treats almost everyone equally. That's why I came all the way to warn myself. But now, it seems that Fu Wenzi has found someone he is interested in. The screen went completely black. However, he failed. "It's like letting a mouse go," he said. He even had a smile on his face, no different from before he was threatened. "It's so boring, you at least gave me some fun." Fu Wenzi let him go. Fur had never seen such a person before, and wanted to tear off his disguise. People like him would not survive if they were timid. After thinking about this, Fur nodded, seemingly agreeing with Fu Wenzi. But in fact, Fu had already made up his mind and would not let Tang Wan go back so easily. Fu Wenzi looked at the surveillance on his screen, with the smile on his face unchanged, and called his father. The tone is still so calm. "Father." Mr. Fu was in a meeting. He waved to the directors, asked them to pause, and walked out. His tone was still indifferent, and he couldn't tell that the person he was calling was his only heir. "What's up?" Fu Wenzi didn't care how indifferent his dear father was. Anyway, in a family like theirs, there were only a few normal people. So Fu Wenzi just shrugged and didn't care. Just after making such an action, he remembered that the person opposite could not see his action at all, so he suppressed the action and continued to speak. "I just want to remind you that you should be concerned about the disappearance of people on the high seas a few days ago." Fu Wenzi heard the sound of a lighter from the opposite side and knew that Mr. Fu was smoking again, but the next second, he heard it. "Fu Wenzi, why didn't I know that I had raised an heir who cared about others?" Fu Wenzi smiled, and then said, 12% profit. "What?" This topic jumped a bit quickly, and Mr. Fu didn't even react at once. However, Mr. Fu is still experienced in many battles. He immediately understood what Fu Wenzi meant and sneered, "You are really? The end justifies the means." But Mr. Fu doesn't think there's anything wrong with this approach. After all, in their family, if you are not strong, you cannot survive. Becoming a chess player or a chess piece requires your own efforts. When Fu Wenzi heard his father's voice, he knew that he agreed to his proposal. Smart people don't need to explain things too fully. Only in this way can the blank space become room for flexible defense. Fu Wenzi hung up the phone and looked at Lu Ziyi, who was running towards him. Hearing him mention Tang Wan again, the smile on his lips never fell and he just nodded in agreement. As everyone knows, only Fu Wenzi got past their hands and made secondary contact with Tang Wan. He was like a gust of wind or rain, silently penetrating into various places around Tang Wan. Become Tang Wan's nourishment and become indispensable to her. From the time he could remember, Fu Wenzi knew that a person's identity could be changed at any time. As long as life is alive, it will make different choices or change into various forms for one reason or another. The only thing that remains unchanged is change itself. Even dead objects that do not seem to change have two interpretations of their meaning. Fu Wenzi didn't care what his identity was in Tang Wan's heart, but he wanted to be an existence that Tang Wan could never ignore. Fu Wenzi doesn't care much whether the meaning of that identity is good or bad. He knows that he is not above board. I also know that there will be many people around Tang Wan who like her. Those people will be kind to her, and will use all kinds of beautiful words to describe everything, so that Tang Wan can grow soft armor. But Fu Wenzi wanted that light. He wanted to stand by Tang Wan's side. No matter what your status is. As long as Tang Wan is mentioned, it will have its own existence. Lu Ziyi and Go 11 were talking, but Go 11 patted him on the shoulder. She gestured to Lu Ziyi with her eyes, asking him to pay attention to Fu Wenzi next to her. Lu Ziyi frowned and looked at Fu Wenzi's unworried look. He couldn't help but said, "Fu Wenzi, aren't you worried?" Fu Wenzi heard his own voice and gave a false answer, "Senior is with her, she should be fine." Honestly, he wished he could accompany him. Don't worry too much. Freer College is also an aristocratic college, and the students there are also polite. Just need a beating, those disobedient savages. Fu Wenzi didn't mean what he said, and Lu Ziyi and Go 11 were not even in his sight. Looking at the boring person in front of him, it seemed as if his vision was black and white again, and all the colors faded because of Tang Wan's departure, making him irritable. Fu Wenzi didn't want to make excuses with them anymore, so with a look of apology on his face, he said to Lu Ziyi and Go 11, "I'm sorry, I'm feeling a little unwell, so I'm going back first." Don't care about their expressions, just turn around and leave. Fu Wenzi felt that he should still pursue the unique colors in the world. After all, except for her, everyone else is mediocre and without any interest. The last day of spring has come to an end, and the weather has suddenly become hotter. Everyone puts on thin shirts to feel the changes of the four seasons in the busy life. Tang Wan opened his eyes. It was a new day. There are 4 days left until the end of the exchange day. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 206. Chapter 206 Zixi, am I some kind of refrigerator? Fur didn't come to school today, so naturally he didn't look for trouble. Xiao Heking went to the upper grade, and Tang Wan entered the elementary school. Different from the Banbanzhen education in China, the learning environment here is more free. Several close classmates sat together and started discussing the topic. No one invited Tang Wan, and they treated her as if she didn't exist and just went about doing what the teacher told her to do. In their hearts, they were wary of and looked down upon Tang Wan. In their eyes, the country in the east is a feudal and backward country that is not yet developed. How capable can the people who come out of that place be? What's more, Tang Wan doesn't understand their language at all. So they treated Tang Wan with this complicated attitude and isolated her. Tang Wan certainly understood their isolation, but Tang Wan didn't take it to heart at all. She is here to learn, not to make friends. And Tang Wan thinks of her friends in China and feels that her friendships are rich enough. She has the best friends in the world, and she has no shortage of friends. Tang Wan took out a pair of large glasses and put them on. Then clicked the side of the glasses to turn on the phone. Simultaneous translation is enabled. This is the latest translator, and every second you use it costs money. Per second, 10 yuan. Tang Wan is a frugal child, so he will not waste money. Other students looked at Tang Wan writing and drawing there and pursed their lips in disdain. In their eyes, Tang Wan's behavior was just pretentious and not worth promoting. What they hate most is this kind of scripted behavior. Now it seems that the countries in the East are indeed backward and barren countries. It turns out that I only use this method to learn now. Tang Wan doesn't care what they think. At her own pace, she honestly recorded everything she said in class, and then integrated it into something new. I found that there is indeed some knowledge in this class that I have not learned at home. It cannot be said that I have benefited a lot, but it is just another way of thinking. After they get out of school, Tang Wan prepares to meet Xiao Heking. However, when she packed her school bag and walked to the door, she saw an unexpected figure standing there. He had Tang Wan's familiar smile on his face. Hold the juice in his hand and talk to the classmates next to him with ease. Just when he saw Tang Wan coming out, he restrained his actions and walked to Tang Wan's side. Tang Wan raised the tablet in his hand and wrote on it. Why are you here? Could it be that there is a third exchange student? Fu Wenzi shook his head. Then he handed the juice in his hand to Tang Wan and said, I came here on leave, with the expectations of my friends. They all miss you and hope you can go back soon. At this point, Fu Wenzi suddenly took out an invitation from his pocket. Tang Wan subconsciously took the invitation and opened it directly. It read, preparations for the new season of New Dad have been completed, and we sincerely invite children from Tangguan to join our program team again. This time it will definitely bring a unique adventure. Our goal this time is to go deep into the mountains. Normally, the invitation would have ended here, but Fu Wenzi made a flipping motion and asked Tang Wan to turn over the entire invitation. Although Tang Wan didn't know why, he followed his instructions. As soon as I opened it, I saw a sentence written by the director at the back. The font was very small and written by hand. Tang Tang, come and join us, the price is good. Kyokyo is your fault. Audience popularity is a very magical thing. Some people try their best to create their own characters, but they just can't be liked by the audience. And some people just stand there, and inexplicably many people like them. Tang Guan's reputation was not good at the beginning. That was because the orphanage deliberately caused it. But by the end of the show, Tang Guan's reputation had magically turned around. This made the fat director sure of one thing. The Tang Guan child's audience popularity is innate. As long as she stands there, people will like her. But it is a typical example of God chasing after people to feed them, and it is also the favorite type of all directors. And Tang Guan is not the kind of kid who likes to cause trouble. She is well behaved, obedient, and very worry-free. She is simply the love child of your dreams. The show is in perfect harmony, so in the new season, the fat director still wants to invite Tang Guan to participate in his show. At least they are all positive and there won't be anything wrong. As for Sujiajia, who was in the control group with Tang Guan last time, the fat director didn't think about it before he sent an invitation letter. There is no way, he is a nostalgic person. If possible, he would still like to make a variety show that can record the healthy growth of children. Tang Guan looked at the invitation in his hand, thought for a while, then raised the tablet and read on it. Did the director talk to Brother Lulin? Fu Wenzi nodded. I have already told the Guardian, but what Lulin said is that I will listen to you. Tang Guan nodded, and then replied with an agreement. Last time, the program team did not finish filming the activities arranged in it, and was forced to stop the project due to unexpected events. Tang Guan actually feels a little regretful. She is very grateful to this program for getting her out of that dark place. Give her a chance to be seen and find her family. Tang Guan is a person who likes to have a beginning and an end. So now that the director has invited her, Tang Guan wants to go. Fu Wenzi looked at Tang Guan's actions and his replies, and the smile on his face became more sincere. Just when Tang Guan finished replying, her children's watch suddenly rang. It is the group of the program group they pulled before. It started to get lively again, but there was one person missing inside, and that was Sujiajia. Since everyone has replied, I will bring in new guests when the time comes. Wound down, dear children, I miss you so much. It's been a long time since I last saw you. How are you doing during this time? Go 11 and Lu Ziyi were the first to reply. The two of them have endless energy and are full of energy. Zixi, we are living a good life, eating well and drinking well, and we have grown a lot taller. Ziz, why is there one person missing? Lu Ziyi didn't realize who the young person was until he said this, and he quickly withdrew it. Then everyone acted as if they had not seen what he said and defended him. Zixi, so who is our new guest this time? Do we know each other? After all, the children selected in this program are basically from the same school as them, and it is rare to encounter situations like Tang Guan and Sujiajia. The director did not answer this question for a long time. Zixi: Zixi, am I some kind of freezer? The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 207. Chapter 207 Funder Dad. Tang Guan quickly answered Go 11's words and did not let this atmosphere stay for too long. Tang, I just found out about this news, and I don't know who it is. Zixi, ouch, where is the fat director? After a while, the fat director replied. Fat guide, I will bring the new kid in later. Yes, our startup date is tentatively scheduled for next week. You should be on summer vacation next week, right? Tang Guan was slightly stunned when he read the sentence. Summer vacation? She has never been to school, but has only heard the names of winter and summer vacations. Fu Wenzi, who was next to Tang Guan, seemed to understand Tang Guan's confusion and also replied in the group. Okay. but Lu Ziyi and Go 11 were obviously very curious. After all, apart from Sujiajia, Chen Shuo will obviously not be coming either. Chen Shuo will not come out until he fails the family assessment. The fat director looked at the two little cubs who were still asking, hesitating a little, but thinking that they would meet sooner or later. He closed his eyes and pulled the two little guests in. One is a very familiar account to Tang Wan. Tang Wan has seen this account in the class group. Ji Helen. The other one is a bit strange, Tang Wan doesn't know him. But Go 11 exploded. Zixi : What's the meaning? Li Tong, don't you despise this kind of program the most? Why do you still come to the show? Tang Wan saw this name and immediately remembered it. This is the classmate who disliked me when I first came to school. That arrogant look is simply synonymous with this school. Li Tong is not a person who swallows her anger, especially when the person she is joking with is Go 11, whom she does not like, and she will not be merciful. Tong, oh, why is there a dog barking? Tong, Director Fatty, why do you even invite dogs to this show? Tang Wan's eyes suddenly darkened. She doesn't like children like Li Tong. Not polite at all. Open your mouth and curse. Although Go 11 was indeed the first to provoke this incident, her words were too unpleasant. Tang Wan thought of this and was about to say something for Go 11 when he saw Ji Helen, who had been silent, send a message. If you don't want to participate, get out. Where do you think this is? Is it your turn to speak? These familiar and unreasonable words surprised Tang Wan. She originally thought that based on Ji Helen's character of not taking things too seriously, she would be happy to hear Li Tong say such things. Unexpectedly, Ji Helen would actually speak for Go 11. However, Li Tong just rolled his eyes, and no one mentioned it again. The fat director looked at the chat in front of him and let out a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, I was the only adult in this group, and no other adults came in. Otherwise, it would be strange if they didn't make a fuss when they looked at these little brats. With Go 11's mother's character, she would definitely go to Li's house that afternoon and beat up Li Tong's mother. As for the Ji family, they would probably just say a gentle word to the young master and tell him to stay out of his own business. Seeing that they all knew each other, the fat guy did not let them introduce each other. He just quickly closed the group chat and discussed matters of interest with the guardians. The fat director looked at the CEO of the SI family and the big devil of the Lu family in front of him, and felt a little headache for a moment. Sometimes, there are too many backgrounds, which is also a burden. The fat director thought of this, but still had a smile on his face, unable to let the two of them see what he was thinking. Lu Lin was the first to speak. I accompanied Tang Tang in the last season, and this season is also the same cast. You should just stay at home and not participate in this show, otherwise the audience will not get used to it. Lu Lin rarely spoke for such a long period of time in one breath, and his words were a bit strange. Obviously he was also dissatisfied with Sci-fi being so unreasonable and coming directly to the director to ask him to participate in the show with Tang Wan. But Sci-fi didn't seem to hear his strange words. He looked at the fat island in front of him and increased his chips as if nothing had happened. It's not difficult for you to invest an additional 10 million yuan and add one person. There is one more person to add. How can there be a child with two guest fathers? Lu Lin stood aside and pursed his lips, looking extremely disdainful. Suddenly, Si Weikai looked at Lu Lin in front of him and said, "But aren't you Tang Tang's brother? You are not her father." Lu Lin. Lu Lin was speechless. However, Si took the opportunity to say, "Having said this, shouldn't you also call me uncle? After all, you and Tang Tang are the same generation." Lu Lin. Lu Lin's face became increasingly ugly, and he was about to burst into anger. The fat director sitting next to him saw that something was wrong and quickly persuaded him to leave. Stand up and use his chubby body to stand between the two of them to smooth things over. Don't be angry, don't be angry, just say what you have to say. Although the program team can't add people now, we can add flying guests. You can be a mission NPC. The fat director was calming Lulin's mood while discussing with Si in a good voice, fearing that either of the two demon kings would be in a bad mood and blow up the entire show. You know, he put a lot of effort into re-recording this program. He begged his uncle, who was the director of a TV station, for 3 whole days. Speaking this out makes everyone feel sad when they hear it, and shed tears when they see it. So for the sake of his own show, the fat director made up his mind not to let go and never let them appear on the same layer. Si also knew that he was going too far in making such a request. But he and Tangwan have missed 5 years, missed her childhood, and let her grow up wasted by so many people, and he already feels very guilty. So Si wants to seize every opportunity to stay with Tangwan and watch her grow up. After a while, Si agreed to Director Fat's suggestion just now and decided to be a guest on the flight and their mission NPC. It was not because he tolerated Lulin, but because he had limited mobility and was in a wheelchair. When doing tasks, Tangwan had to compete with those people. His difficulty in moving would also hinder her and prevent her from having fun. Wouldn't it be worth the loss than the gain? Thinking of this, Si took a step back and stopped mentioning himself, insisting on inserting himself into the thoughts of their program team. The investment money is still given to the fat director, and we cannot let our children suffer in the program group. The fat director slowly opened his mouth as he looked at the increasing amount of funds. To be honest, for the first time in so many years of running a program, he felt that he had abundant funds. So good. Such a gold master dad more. End of this chapter. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 208. Chapter 208, I'm so greedy for them. Tangwan didn't know that Lulin and Si had staged a big drama with the fat director, fighting for their right to belong. She looked at the messages in the group and gradually fell into calmness. When she was about to close the screen, she suddenly saw Ji Helen posted something. At Tang Tang, when will you come back? The school's tasks are a bit heavy, you left a bit too suddenly, and the Secretary General didn't hand over his duties, so now everyone doesn't know what to do. Tangwan looked at the message sent by Ji Helen, slowly turned his head, and put his eyes on Fu Wenzi. Speaking of it, the student union of the primary school does not have the position of vice president, but only a secretary general. If he and Fu Wenzi both leave the school, then it seems that the only ones who make decisions are those in charge. But those officers are all new to their posts, and they don't know the students at the school very well. Tangwan still made some adjustments before leaving school. He also wrote down the work to be done during this period on a piece of paper and sent it to each officer. Tangwan had calculated everything, but he failed to calculate that Fu Wenzi would also come after him from school. Now it seems that I have to say hello to them again. However, Fu Wenzi replied to Ji Helen's words. Don't worry, I borrowed some people from the junior high school, and they will help look after it. If you have any questions, just ask them in the group, and they will be dealt with as soon as possible. Fu Wenzi certainly couldn't let anyone leave any clues in his beautiful resume. Especially what he is doing now is related to Tangwan's opinion of him, and he will not act carelessly. So before leaving, Fu Wenzi found a few people he knew well from the junior high school and asked them to guard the junior high school student union. There are only 3 days anyway. If you can't do well in these 3 days, then those people's abilities will only be that much. After all, those people wanted something from him. So Fu Wenzi became more arrogant than before. Ji Helen looked at Fu Wenzi's words, pursed his lips slightly, and seemed to be in a very bad mood. He originally thought that the Secretary General was in a hurry and had no time to arrange these things. After all, Fu Wenzi's arrangements were not heard from Lu Ziyi and Go 11. But he didn't expect that this man had expected everything, and even made him a little angry. The small reports he was making now were also what Fu Wenzi had expected. Fu Wenzi seemed to be waiting for someone to give Tangwan eye drops, so that he could publicize what he had done behind his back. Across the screen, Ji Helen could feel the depth of Fu Wenzi's thoughts. But he couldn't say it. After all, in Tangwan's heart, the people who had been on the show with her were her best friends. Tangwan is a person who is extremely partial to those he trusts. She is exactly like the Lu family, extremely defensive. Thinking of this, Ji Helen suppressed his displeasure and replied to the group. So that's it, blame me for talking too much. Tangwan rarely sees Ji Helen subdued, and feels that Ji Helen across the screen is much better behaved than he usually is in the classroom. At least not as rude as usual. Fu Wenzi pretended not to have seen Ji Helen's reply. He looked at Tangwan, who was standing aside, and said to her, Tang, how about taking me to try the canteen of this school? Having said this, Fu Wenzi glanced at the school and squinted his eyes slightly. He couldn't see the real emotions in his eyes, but he just felt that he seemed a little curious. This is my first time coming to this school. What's the best food here? Tangwan thought for a while, shook his head slightly, and wrote on the tablet. I don't know what delicious food they have here. When I came here for the first time, they just gave me a sandwich. Really? Fu Wenzi smiled, subconsciously rubbed his little thumb and tapped his index finger. It was like knocking something in the air. But Tangwan knew that this was just an act of thinking by Fu Wenzi. Not long after, Fu Wenzi retracted his move and said to Tangwan, then maybe they really don't have anything good to eat here. It's too barren. The history of their school is too short. Tangwan didn't know how he came to this conclusion. He just felt that it was a bit cruel, but it was also right. Anyway, Tangwan has not had any good impression of this school since he saw the cultural relics of their country in this school. I thought that after the exchange birthday was over, she would never come here again. The feeling here for her was really a bit barbaric. The survival system is more cruel than that of Lingyun College. Their survival system does not even have anything to do with the quality of the students themselves. It is only related to the families behind them. Only their families can determine their status in this school. Although Frank was always sitting next to Tangwan, it seemed that her attention was always on the puppet show. However, in reality, Tangwan's eyes were directed at the other students in this school. Most of the students' eyes flashed with an evasive and cowardly look. Most of their gazes were on Frank beside them. They are afraid of Frank. Tangwan discovered this fact, and his vigilance against Frank rose to the extreme. Logically speaking, Frank and Chris have similar families, but it is obvious that these classmates are more afraid of Frank. Moreover, Tangwan always felt that the exchanges between Frank and herself always contained some hypocrisy. Not very sincere anyway. Tangwan did not share these thoughts with anyone else. Tangwan knew that what she needed to do in this school was to be careful in her words and actions. After all, there were dangers here, such as the Sujiajia she saw performing a puppet show. He will not even be treated as a normal life here, but as a plaything. If possible, Tangwan would even want to take Sujiajia back. After all, she is a human being. The torture she suffered here made Sujiajia go crazy. Tangwan was thinking as he and Fu Wenzi walked towards the canteen. Chris and Xiao Heking had already been waiting for them at the door. When Chris saw Fu Wenzi, his expression suddenly changed. Obviously, he didn't like Fu Wenzi. He showed it on his face and didn't even bother to pretend. But in front of Tangwan, he still didn't do anything more. He rolled his eyes with an unhappy expression on his face, but reached out and grabbed Tangwan, who was walking beside Fu Wenzi. He immediately pulled Tangwan to his side, still talking. Today we are not eating hot pot, we are eating barbecue. Both of them are very tasty, I'm so greedy for them. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 209. Chapter 209 Inseparable. Tang Wan heard what Chris said and nodded in agreement. She is not a doormat. Others treat her this way, so of course she must have a way to fight back. Although most of it is because of Chris's help. Chris saw Tang Wan's expression, and blinked his eyes inexplicably, and then understood what Tang Wan meant. He walked quietly to Tang Wan's side, and then whispered, "It's okay." Tang Wan understood what Chris meant. Because we are all friends, it doesn't matter. He doesn't mind using his family connections to vent his anger. The group had a busy lunch in the cafeteria just like yesterday. Tang Wan noticed carefully that there were fewer and fewer people eating in the canteen this time. Maybe it was yesterday's hot pot that left a shadow on them, and they didn't dare to eat again. Perhaps it was because of Chris's relationship that Frank, who had been preparing to cause trouble for Tang Wan from the beginning, did not show up. The remaining time passed quickly, but Tang Wan was always thinking about someone in his heart. It is Sujiajia. The words Sujiajia said made Tang Wan feel that maybe some things were not as simple as he imagined. She was a little curious. What does it mean, original life is not like this? Does there really exist parallel time and space in the world? Just because of some reason, Sujiajia is much more important now than before. But, how to rescue Sujiajia from Frank is a big problem. Tang Wan has never done such a thing, and she doesn't know if Sujiajia is willing to leave with her. What if Sujiajia yelled while taking her away? This will add a lot of difficulty. Tang Wan frowned slightly when he thought of this, feeling a little embarrassed. But soon, her tightly knitted brows relaxed. Some things are not something she can do alone if she wants to. If Sujiajia didn't have the instinct to survive, even if she did these things, she would not get the corresponding results. As for why Sujiajia said she wanted to survive by leaving Frank, it was because Tang Wan looked at Sujiajia's condition that day and it really didn't look like she was having a good time. After thinking about it, Tang Wan gave up the idea of saving Sujiajia and leaving. After all, she doesn't have any ability to take Sujiajia out of here now, and Tang Wan can't see Frank at all now, let alone want to save Sujiajia. As for asking Chris for help, Tang Wan had never thought about it. After all, this is her own business, why bother dragging Chris into the water? Frank did not appear once in the following days. When Tang Wan was already preparing to board the plane to return home, she received a strange text message on her watch. "See you next time, doll." Tang Wan doesn't like others calling her a doll. Especially this text message looked like it was sent by Frank. There was not much kindness in it, but it was filled with extreme malice, which made Tang Wan feel a little uncomfortable. After all, coming out of his mouth, this title was like the way he took Tang Wan to see a puppet show. The performer has no ability to resist and can only be at his mercy. Make those related actions and live rigidly and helplessly in this world. Looking like a loser who has been eliminated. Tang Wan doesn't like it. At the last moment when the child's watch lost signal, a new message was sent to her watch. "Aren't you going to take your friends with you? She's not having a good time here with me, but that's okay, you don't like her anyway." Tang Wan's face darkened slightly. She looked very unhappy. Fu Wenzi, who was sitting next to her, immediately felt that Tang Wan was in something wrong. Asked, "What's the matter? Has anyone made you unhappy?" Tang Wan doesn't want to tell these things to children who are similar to herself. Because in this matter, their decision will not bring any reversal to the matter, but will only increase irritability. Tang Wan decided to wait until he returned to China to tell the adults about these things. After all, Missing persons is a very serious matter in China. Fu Wenzi was a little surprised when he saw Tang Wan shaking his head. Tang Wan is not a person who likes to hold things in his heart. It is probably really difficult to make him make such expressions and actions. Fu Wenzi felt a little strange when he thought about this. According to Tang Wan's character, who arranges everything, how could he be in such a state? It's really unreasonable and weird. But soon the hesitant look disappeared from Tang Wan's face and became as calm and collected as usual. Tang Wan turned his head and looked out the window at the clouds that seemed to be within reach, feeling a little more relaxed. She is not a bird living in the clouds. If she is not careful, she will fall to the ground and be destroyed. Everything she has is real, so when she as a child has something she can't solve, she can throw her problems out and hand them over to omnipotent adults. Take the lead in experiencing life yourself. Thinking of this, the troubles in Tang Wan's heart disappeared. Soon they returned to the country. After Tang Wan said goodbye to his friends, he returned home and saw Sci-fi sitting in a wheelchair. He sat at the door waiting for himself. Although his face was still expressionless and indifferent, Tang Wan knew that he was in a good mood. Seeing that he had returned safely, he seemed to breathe a long sigh of relief. It seems like a wish has been fulfilled. Tang Wan knew that through himself, he saw someone who had long gone. It is one's own mother. The mother who left her father did not come back, but she had to return to her father in her place. She must always have a way back, always return home, and never leave her father alone again. Tang Wan thought of this and quickened his pace. Trotted up to Sci-fi and threw herself into his arms. This time, Tang Wan hugged Sci-fi tightly like a tired bird returning home. If she could speak now, she would probably say something like her mother. I'm back. But she could only slowly open her mouth and say a meaningless sentence, ah. Sci-fi stretched out his hand and stroked Tang Wan's head. His voice was a little hoarse, and he said word by word, it'll be good if you come back. Just come back. As long as the home is no longer cold, he feels everything is fine. He never wanted to go back to that empty time. So he hugged Tang Wan, as if two souls who had been walking for a long time found peace at this moment. All the anxiety and pain disappeared at this moment. The thing called home entangles them. Inseparable. The little mute's life was stolen, and the wealthy boss comes to spoil him. Author, do you want to eat rabbit head? Chapter 210. Chapter 210, those who are near the water and the towers first come first. Sci did not tell Tang Wan about his quarrel with Lu Lin, nor did he want to increase her troubles. So I asked Tang Wan to rest at home for a few days, and then made arrangements for Tang Wan to record the program. The final assessment of Lingyuan College is based on daily performance plus a final unified examination. The two are added together, and the combined score is the final score for the semester. Tang Wan usually attends school very rarely, so he can only rely on the final college exam to improve his grades. She scored 80% of the final exam with almost full marks, and won the first place in their grade in one fell swoop. Tang Wan's results surprised everyone when they came out. It is important to know that very few students can get first place in written scores even when their attendance rate is less than half. It is really rare. It also shows that Tang Wan's basic scores are very solid and not biased at all. Not only that, the test papers of Lingyuan College are not unified nationwide, but are written by many teachers. The difficulty level can be achieved not only by listening carefully in class, but also by expanding one's extracurricular knowledge. Many students do not get full marks in knowledge other than books. So when they knew that Tang Wan was so busy and knew so much knowledge, they were even more surprised. This can be summarized as more than just diligence. I have to admit that Tang Wan is very smart. Time flies so fast, and when the final results are released, it will be summer vacation. The weather is getting hotter and hotter, so Tang Wan also puts on short sleeves. With careful care, the scars on his body began to fade in color and were no longer as hideous as before. Those newly grown pink wounds are like some kind of flowers blooming on Tang Wan's body. If the scars in the past were like thorns entangled and trapped in place, now they are truly coming to life. Our growth rate is very fast, and if we don't pay attention, we will reach the height of one head. When they came to the program set, the staff felt a little strange looking at the little cubs in front of them. Calculating that it was only half a year before they parted, how could there be such an earth-shaking change? Fu Wenzi's change was the most obvious. His face lost a lot of roundness, and the edges and corners became obvious, and he actually looked somewhat mature and reliable. But Tang Wan's changes were more from the inside out than Fu Wenzi's. If Tang Wan was a little timid before, now she has gradually lost her timidity and become more and more brave. Although he is not as cheerful, lively, and outgoing as he Go 11, he can still be regarded as a carefree child. Emitting from the inside out is the confidence of being firmly chosen by friends and relatives. Tang Wan is no longer the panicked person before, who became frightened at the slightest disturbance. Hunter watched these children get out of the nanny car, and one or two of them started talking like crazy. "Ah, I haven't seen these little cubs for a long time, come and let me take a bite of them. Cute. So cute, Tang Tang is still so cute. Wow, she seems to have grown a little, her eyes are bigger. The face looks round and easy to pinch. Zhizzy. Zhizzy looks like a little boy." All the roundness in his body disappeared, and he looked a lot like his father. "I don't think it looks like it. After all, Mr. Fu's temperament is a bit too cold to be human, but Zhizzy still has this gentle smile on his face, very gentlemanly." "Very gentleman? Am I the only one who thinks the arc of his smile has not changed?" Obviously it was just out of superficial politeness, but he still squeaked indifferently, but the direction of indifference was different from that of his father. "Laughing to death, what does indifference mean? The direction is different. Laughing to death, what good can I do to you? You can inherit mine, Aunt Bei. There's nothing to say, Zixi is still a little son, let my sister hold the cute baby. Z still wants to work hard to be Tang Tang's brother, but every time he can only call her aunt. What an unfair name. Lu family brother position Z. Lulin still had a stinky face as if everyone owed him 80,000 yuan. It was really a familiar recipe and a familiar taste. But it seems that a few people can't come this time. Have they been replaced? The small barge just passed by, and they got off the nanny car, two new little guests. Ji Helen looked at Fu Wenzi who was walking to Tang Wan's side. He immediately jumped out of the nanny car and ran to Tang Wan's side with a smile on his face. Paired with his slightly curly hair, he really looks like a little angel. He shouted to Tang Wan, "Tang Tang. Long time no see." He looked full of energy, which was in sharp contrast to Fu Wenzi next to Tang Wan. One was calm and the other was lively, and the other was still, which seemed to be the ultimate contrast. "Ah, what kind of little angel of vitality is this? I seem to know Tang Tang, are you Tang Tang's classmate? It should be so." Looking at Tang Wan rushing to his side, he must be a classmate with whom he has a good relationship. They were sitting at the same table, and they were never separated when they were in school. Make emphasis, do not separate. Yo. Fortunately, the children couldn't see the barrage, otherwise they would have been very angry. As the barrage passed by, the camera was also in front of Ji Helen's eyes. Ji Helen waved his hand to the camera generously and introduced himself in an uplifting tone. "Hello everyone, my name is Ji Helen, you can call me Mumu. Tang Tang and I are classmates and desk mates, and we usually go to class together. I don't know why, but I seem to see Zhizzy's face getting uglier and uglier, ha 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 ha. Although I don't know how you can tell that his expression has changed from his smile that didn't even rise by 0.1 degree, but looking at him like this, I really want to laugh. Ha ha ha, I want to laugh too. Children are so possessive. Obviously, the expressions on the faces of these children who have been friends with Tangwan since the last season are not very good. Don't worry, Zixi still has 3 seconds to reach the battlefield. As soon as the small barrage passed by, Go 11 rushed to Tangwan's side and blocked Ji Helen. She raised her head, raised her chin, and snorted coldly, "So what if we are at the same table? Is it possible that you can get closer to the higher end first? We are the best friends." Tangwan frowned slightly, worried about Go 11's Chinese performance. The people near the water and the tower get the moon first. How is this idiom used? No wonder Zixi was deducted 5 points for her Chinese essay this time. Laughter to death, this word is so strange to use. 11 I got perfect marks for my composition.